Welcome back to Growth Over Easy. If you're listening to this today and you are someone who struggles with stress, hypervigilance, you feel like you're kind of always in danger, you're always on. Maybe you lay in bed at night and your head is still going. You sit on the couch next to your wife and you feel like, I can't actually relax. My body is bracing. I want you to listen to this episode because I'm going to share with you a story about a client. I'm going to call him Dan for the purpose of this episode, and how nervous system work has been the missing piece in Dan's life and why it is so much more effective, particularly for men, than talk therapy. So Dan came to me because he was experiencing a lot of rage and explosive anger in his relationship. When his wife would give him any kind of feedback, he heard it as criticism and it would set him off and then shut him down. So as we started going through my blueprint awareness method and we looked at his experiences in early childhood, and at a very young age, he had a lot of responsibility put on him. He was doing things that the adults in his life should have been doing, not him. And he was also criticized a lot by his parents. And it was a volatile, unstable environment growing up. Dan also served in the military for quite a while and was in combat overseas, in the war. And he had a lot of those experiences that had imprinted on him, that trauma from his time in the military. The first thing I worked on with Dan was experiencing safety in his nervous system, because a lot of people have never experienced safety that way. They've never truly had the opportunity to feel safe in their body. And if you grew up in an unstable, unpredictable, volatile household, you likely do not have a very good relationship to safety. So that's always my first goal with a client is, okay, let's get them to experience safety in their body. Because as I start to work with the activation, the trauma, stuff that's coming up, I want to know that we can get you back to this place. Because this is something that happens a lot in talk therapy that drives me crazy. People get re-traumatized because a therapist will try to get you to talk about an event that happened when your nervous system, when your body is not ready. You don't have access to safety and it becomes too much and too overwhelming to where it can actually re-traumatize somebody. And I have heard so many horror stories from clients, friends who've experienced this with a therapist where they will open up Pandora's box of your traumatic experiences and then be like, it's time to go home, and just leave you sitting in all that shit. Like, it drives me crazy. So I do not do that in my work. We start with establishing safety so you know what that feels like in your body before we start to work with the activation. And sometimes it's working with the activation that's just showing up that day. Sometimes it's working through specific scenarios, memories, things that have happened to you. So Dan and I have been doing this for several weeks where we either work with what's just showing up for him in the moment or with specific memories that have happened in the past. And in this last session, he came in and he said, hey, my wife told me that I've been a lot easier to talk to over the last week, which, guys, this is a huge win. It means when his wife would bring something up to talk to him about, instead of his body going into high alert mode and flagging it as criticism, he was able to stay present and listen, and they were able to have conversations. And then this part was really big. So where Dan works, sometimes there can be a lot of people around, sometimes he's by himself. And he had been doing something by himself, and then he looked up to see that quite a few people, 50 in fact is what he said, had gathered around him. Now, typically in the past, this would have set him off because he found events like this really triggering from his time in the military. And I asked him, I was like, well, what happened? He's like, I looked up and I felt a little bit of that, like he said, tingle, like activation. And then I was like, I'm okay. And of course, I'm just beaming when I hear this because I'm like, yes, it's working. His body is no longer going into the triggers. He's instead being able to access safety even when an event happens that would typically trigger him. This is what I love about nervous system work, is we had been working with some activation. We haven't even unpacked or gone through everything that we could have, and he's already starting to see results in his everyday life. That is the goal. The goal in working with a practitioner should be you don't need them anymore because you're able to expand your window of tolerance to the point where things show up in life and you make it through them and you're okay. You're not in a survival state. You're not going into fight like he normally would, or flight and running away, or completely shutting down and your system is stuck in freeze, or you go into fawn and you try to fix it. You're able to stay present in the moment and know that I am safe. I am okay. So if you are someone who experiences emotions that don't feel appropriate for the moment, or you get into an argument with your wife and it escalates so much more than it ever needed to. And I tell my clients that happens because you're not fighting about what's happening in the moment. When you come into an argument and it gets really messy, it's likely because what happened to you beforehand, what happened to her beforehand, your childhoods, all of that comes into play because we're acting out of that part of ourself that is wired for survival, not that part of ourself that is grounded. And so if any of Dan's story relates to you, if you are someone who experiences chronic stress, if you feel like you always have to be on, if you feel like you can never just sit down at the end of the day and exhale and relax, if your mind is racing when you go to bed, if as soon as you open your eyes in the morning, you're like, here we go again. If you're in that chronic state of activation, please come to this free class. It's called At Ease, and it's all about why you can't relax at home, even when nothing is wrong. There is a link in the show notes. It's happening on January 20th, and we are going to break down what is going on in your nervous system and how you move through that so that you, like Dan, can experience safety, you can experience connection, and when stuff comes along that would typically trigger you, you can stay present and you can move through it. I hope this helps. I hope I see you on the 26th, and I hope you choose growth.
If you enjoyed this episode and you're a fan of the show, please subscribe and leave us a review. If you'd like to connect, you can join me over on Substack or follow me on Instagram at LilyRachels. Let's build love that grows.